Hello and welcome to the Interviewing Zone. I'm Brian McIvor, and on today's video I'm going to show you how to fill out a competency-based application form. I'll be dealing with it in three parts. Firstly, with the competencies themselves, but I'll also give you instruction on how to fill out the any other information part of the form, and also the part of the form where you're asked for the justification for the job, saying why you should be considered for the particular post. As well as that, there'll be a brief bit at the end about clear writing so that your form can be readable as well as persuasive. So let's get started. The bad news is that it's going to take about the equivalent of a working day of your life to get the form into play. Now, you might think that's bad news, but can I put it this way? You work 200, 230, 40 days a year, and let's imagine your boss came to you and said, we're going to give you one day to make a case for promotion. The only work you're going to do that day is to make a written case as to why we should grant you an interview or give you a new job. I'm sure that you'd put the dedication and energy into that you'd put into your best project, because you are your best project. Think of it that way. There are three things that you need to get into play before you put a single word onto the form or on screen, because a lot of forms nowadays ask you to fill them in on screen. What I recommend you do is you do a bit of prep work first, then put your text into a word processor, correct it, get it straightened out, and then cut and paste onto the screen. The three bits of preparation are: number one, get on top of the job description. The job description contains the duties, responsibilities, roles, reporting relationships, and everything relevant to the role. Also accompanying a job description is usually a person specification, qualifications, skills, traits that need to be held by the person who will be occupying the job. The second part you need to get on top of and get into in detail are the competency statements. Usually there's about 4 or 5 of these, and I'm going to concentrate on 4 generic ones: managing results, communicating, gathering data and analysis, and working in teams. These are the 4 most common ones that we see on forms, and there's a logic to the order I'm giving you. Most people do something like put excellent communication skills on their CVs, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of words in the English language that describe communication. You've got to get right down into the detail of the behaviours and skills that make up the competency. So while we're at it, communication skills consists of listening, talking, presenting, persuading, negotiating, influencing. I could go on. And this is another one that you need to explore, because there are at least 9 major roles inside teams. You could be the leader, you could be the fault finder, you could be the person who looks for opportunities, the person who contributes ideas. So you need to be clear about how you function in a team. So the third part of your preparation is presenting your case based on your experience. This means that you must list the major work experiences of your life and relate them to the competencies. This is something only you can do because you know your history better than anybody else. And to make this easier for you, we have devised a thing called the matrix. And what you do in the matrix is you plot major work events versus the competencies. Well, here's one we did earlier. Let's talk about Hillary's year. Hillary had a very interesting and diverse year. It ranged from inducing new members of staff into the organisation and into the team. At the end of the year, roles of the team were reallocated. But in the meantime, Hillary had to deal with GDPR, data protection. They had to deal with reorganising printing. And they also had a big challenge in getting a decision about an unsuitable piece of computer software reversed. and I'll be telling you more about that later. So on the form, what Hilary does is list the 10 major work events, and then they're plotted against the 4 competencies. And I advise that you cut and paste the detail of the competencies into the particular boxes, rather than just going with the headings, because those sub-skills or behaviours are the very things that the HR people will be ticking off during the interview. And you've got to be aware that you've ticked all the boxes yourself in the case that you present. Hilary was told that a new computer package was being put in play to pay their suppliers, but when they did their background research, they discovered that the package was not designed for the European area, and something had to be done about this. They also needed to make a case to hang on to their existing system until the issues got sorted out. To do this, they had to analyse a huge amount of data about the new system and the existing system, do comparisons and draw conclusions. So that means data analysis gets a 1. But there was a huge amount of communication involved, because they had to write up the report, convince their boss, convince the board that made the original decision that they would have to reverse it or put a stay on it. So the third competency would be about achieving results, and that's pretty close to the first 2. But one competency that wasn't really involved here was team working, because this was largely a solo run that Hilary as manager had to do, so that's a 4. So to recap, analysis and decision making was first, closely followed by communication skills, closely followed by achieving results, and then trailing the field is team working. So that's the matrix. What I'm going to show you now is how to lay out your example where they ask you for a single case or a single instance under each of the competencies. They might say, give us an example of a time when. So you'll be using the STAR structure for this, and the rough proportions for STAR are you'll probably spend 15% of your account just giving the background. You'll need to put in 1 sentence about the task or objective. 3/4 of the narrative will be about the actions you took related to the competencies, and the remaining 10-15% for the results, what you achieved, what you learned, how you applied it. So let's take a real life example. Say you were asked to arrange remote working facilities for members of your team during the COVID period. You can approach this from 2 angles. One, it's an example of achieving results, or it could be an example of teamwork. The mistake you could make is writing one account up and deciding which of the 2 competencies to put it into. That would be unwise, because the examples are supposed to reflect the sub-competencies of the component behaviours of each of the respective competencies. So under achieving results, you'll need to show how you prioritise things, how you scheduled, arranged, etc. If you're telling the story from the team working aspect, it's about how you motivated people. So before doing anything, familiarise yourself with the components of the achieving results competency. And they are taking initiative, taking responsibility, multitasking, structuring, planning and scheduling your work, being logical and pragmatic, identifying new solutions, and being enthusiastic and customer focused. So when you write up your account, your actions are going to have to reflect most, if not all, of those behaviours. Situation. I was asked by my manager to coordinate the supports for working at home during COVID. I was given a free hand to transfer office functions in such a way that we could serve our customers as before. One of the challenges was that half the staff were new and not fully up to speed with the systems. Task. I was given 10 working days to get the system into place. There was a small budget available to cover computer kit or software support. Actions. When I started working on the proposals, I realised we had a number of problems with demands and resources. At the same time, I had to manage not only my own deadlines, but those of other people on the team. There was a lot of coordination here. To do this, I drew up a spreadsheet, which was a project plan, circulated to everybody so that everybody knew what was happening and when and what everybody else was doing. While this was going on, I was liaising with each member of the team in turn to see that they had all the supports and information that they needed. Communications and technology were key, so I prioritised at the early stages getting everybody's computer systems up to speed and getting the software working well. I arranged updated kit and software packages to be sent to a number of people who weren't up to speed previously. I also initiated a daily messaging and updating system to let everybody know what was happening. I worked on the items in priority order, in case order, and rescheduled tasks were appropriate. People found their work rhythm and we were able to function properly within the 2 weeks. Result? We achieved our targets. The manager informed me that my section had been rated the most effective in the organisation in its response to COVID. We had delivered the same results as we would have done previously, something no other team had quite done. Some of our systems are now being used by others with equally effective results. So that's the story told from the point of view of achieving results. But there's another way you can tell the story, and that's about how you motivated and supported the team during this particular transition. So in this example, before we get stuck into it, I want you to take a look at the component behaviours of team working as we have them. Working well with others, providing clear advice and support, training and coaching people, setting clear objectives, supporting teams and individuals, and dealing with performance issues. Situation. When COVID required us to lock down and work from home, I was charged with making sure that my team functioned properly when working remotely. It complicated things that a number of the team members were newly appointed and not yet fully up to speed. I also had been having performance problems with one member of the team even before the whole thing started. My task. I was given 2 weeks to ensure that each member of the team were supported and guided to help them deal with the situation. I was instructed to remain in contact with the others to help them as required and to meet performance goals. Actions. The first stage was to check in the immediate aftermath of the lockdown to see how people were getting on. I got into a fixed routine of calling everybody every day and encouraging people to stay in touch with the full team. However, I noticed that some people weren't coping as well as I would have expected. The newer members of the team required a lot of hand-holding for the early stages, but I was able to team them up with more experienced people, and they got on fine. My underperformer was still a problem initially, but after a few exchanges over Zoom, I got things moving. I assigned them to 1 or 2 joint projects with the senior members of the team so they didn't get left behind. Motivation was high in the early stages, but started to flag a bit after the second month. I had 1 or 2 meetings to sort this out, but now people are much more motivated as they realise they're being supported by others and by management, and there's a better mutual understanding of everybody's individual situation. Result? Levels of motivation have stayed high and improved. Performance levels are holding, and some members of the team are being proactive in a way that they weren't before. So you'll notice in that example that the task was set in terms of what I wanted the team to achieve and how it was going to function. It's not on the task, it's about the team. and the results were about how the team worked. If I might take an example from sport, achieving results is about setting targets about how many goals that you're going to score. Teamwork is about how you get the team to work together. In training, two totally different things. Similarly in competencies. Now, it's a real life situation that most things we do involve 2 or 3 competencies at any one time, and it's up to you to decide which one was taken to the highest level. Or putting it another way, was it more easy or difficult to score the goals or to motivate the team? You may be asked to provide a number of examples within a couple of hundred words, and that means you've got to be concise in writing mini star statements. Here's one for communications. With 6 weeks to go to year end, we had a backlog of 200 cases. I was asked to arrange a roster of staff, and we had a certain amount of overtime to play with. People weren't initially happy or willing to get involved. It was coming up to the end of the year. However, I explained the requirements to people, negotiated with people, briefed people, put a plan together, and I worked out a system that suited everybody. The backlog was cleared, and the team credited me with doing a tough but necessary job fairly and competently and keeping them in the loop. So that's the whole thing in less than 100 words. Another thing that you can do is to provide what I call a range statement, which is to summarize your experience in the competency. This is to give breadth and depth to your experience. Here's one for team working. Over a 10-year period, I've managed a number of teams, ranging from 3 people initially to managing a department of 30 people, where I now have 4 supervisors reporting to me. Making the case for the job. This is a part of the form that requires a lot of care and will be looked at very closely by the interviewers and by HR. The classic mistake is to put in a statement that is woolly and fluffy. Something like, I'm excellent at communicating. I would be a terrific candidate. I love a challenge. And all sorts of nonsense that has no evidential weight behind it. I recommend a 3-part structure. Part 1. Concisely state your understanding of the role. Here's an example. I understand that this role requires an experienced team leader with a background of working in a high security, high pressure environment. Part 1. Part 2. Over the last 5 years, I have been involved with a number of frontline teams and operating at the highest levels of responsibility. I am certified to the highest level of security clearance in this area, and my work has been commended by the board. The third part of the statement is where you may be asked to show what's called motivational fit. For example, I'm applying for this job because I have worked in the area for the last 10 years. I'm familiar with the systems and the people, and I'm very comfortable with the challenges and roles. You've put a lot of work into your form, and if you use the structures I've shown you, you will do well. However, you need to obey the rules of good writing, which are: make it readable. In other words, keep sentence length short, use bullet points, use paragraph breaks. And by the way, star structure is wonderful for that. You put S in one paragraph, T in one line, and so on. And keep the jargon out of it. Don't use long words and jargon just to impress people. It will have the opposite effect. At the end of the day, you should produce a document that's both convincing and easy to negotiate. So it's up to you. Good luck with your application. I hope you do well. This is Brian McIvor on the Interviewing Zone at www.brianmciver.com. Thank you very much for looking in today.